Is the mic? Yep. Hello? Check, check. Sound good? Yeah? All right. Are we ready? All right. Hello. And welcome back to our last class of the Homesteading series. Thank you for braving the cold and coming out tonight. My name is Jillae. I am from Wanderin Barefoot Farm in Campton Hills. And tonight is our last night, so you can see what we've already gone over in the previous lectures about our homesteading series. I believe you can find those all on YouTube. I know there's definitely some of them up. So if you want to rewatch any of those or see any of them, that's where you can find it. Tonight we're talking about raising chickens. So I do want to start off by saying I have written a book on raising chickens. So if you want more details, this is kind of a basic beginner overview. But if you do want more details, you can find that book on my website, wanderinbarefootfarm.com. It goes into a little more detail about raising chickens. So like I said, we are Wanderin Barefoot Farm, and here you'll see all of us, me, my husband Wesley, and then we have two boys. Wyatt is 3 and Archie is 13 months. All right, so first I want to start off with some myths and facts about chickens. There's a lot of myths and facts out there that people think are real that aren't, so let's go over a couple. The first one I hear the most is that you need a rooster for chickens to lay eggs, and that is not true at all. You only need a rooster to have chicks, to have fertile eggs, and to protect your flock. But hens will lay eggs without a rooster. Another myth is that chickens are noisy. They are not noisy at all. They actually make really cute cooing sounds, and they're actually quite quiet. It's the roosters that are pretty loud. Another myth is that fertile eggs are bad to eat. Majority of the eggs that you get from the grocery store are going to be fertile if they make it that far. So roosters are always kind of in the mix in larger facilities that produce eggs. So fertile eggs are not bad to eat. Once they start developing, that's another story, but most eggs are fertile anyways, and most farm fresh eggs are also fertile. But once you wash the egg, it actually stops the fertilization process. So all of eggs from the store are washed, so you don't even have to worry about that. Farm fresh eggs can come washed or unwashed. Just know that when you're buying them and figure out what they are. But yes, fertile eggs are perfectly fine to eat. Another myth is that hens lay eggs all the time. Hens actually stop laying eggs quite often. Chickens go through a thing called molting, which is when they lose all of their feathers, and during that time they will stop laying eggs. They also stop laying eggs often in the winter months. Chickens need a certain amount of light in order to lay eggs. So once we hit daylight savings time and the days get shorter, their egg production drops quite significantly. Some fun chicken facts. Chickens can actually remember over 100 faces of other chickens and other birds. So they have really fantastic memories, and they're pretty smart, which is crazy. They actually are compared often to toddlers in their intelligence level, so that's pretty good for a chicken, I would say. Chickens talk to their chicks before they're hatched, so they can actually have conversations with their unhatched chicks, which is really interesting as well. And they are very nurturing. Mother hens are very nurturing, and they're often compared to human mothers. They have a lot of the same qualities as human mothers do. So they're often compared to humans, which is also interesting. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about what you should know and what you should do before you get chickens. So the first one is zoning. Depending on where you live, every city and state and county has different zoning laws when it comes to raising chickens. So you do need to figure out if your county or the town you live in specifically allows you to have chickens. Some counties let you have up to 5 chickens. Some counties let you have unlimited chickens depending on your acreage. Some towns don't let you have chickens at all. So that is the first step, is figuring out if chickens are allowed in your town. So for Wheaton specifically, which I believe is where, are we Wheaton or Winfield? Wheaton? So Wheaton, you can have chickens, but they say on the website you can have them for 90 days. I'm not really sure how that works. I would assume that most people have their chickens for much longer than 90 days if they get chickens. So I'm not really sure the details of that. I didn't deep dive into it, but definitely check out specific towns and their zoning codes for chickens. You have to determine the care of your chickens. Chickens require daily care. They require someone going out in the morning and letting them out, someone putting them in at night, making sure their water is fresh, providing their food every day. So you need to figure out who's going to care for the chickens and how it's going to fit into your schedule. You also want to make sure that you get some education on raising chickens, just to keep your flock safe, to make sure that you're using safe food handling processes, to look out for disease and bugs and all the other things that come along with chickens. It's just good to have a little bit of education behind you when you're going into your venture. The next thing you want to know is, what is your intention with having chickens? Do you want meat birds? Do you want hens that lay eggs? So figuring out exactly where you want to go with your intention of raising chickens is an also good thing to keep in mind. Budget is another thing that you'll want to know when keeping chickens. So chicks typically depends, but they're typically $2 to $6. $6 are usually those unique chickens. Polish are usually $6. Silkies are usually $6. Those hens are not so much for laying, but more so for looks and hobby. So it kind of depends on where you're going with your process. So you want to put in the chick budget. The coop budget is another thing you'll want to know. We're going to go over some chicken coops. So you can really have a pretty low budget on building a chicken coop, or you can have a nice bigger chicken coop that's going to cost you a lot more. And then feed, obviously. Depending on how many birds you have, you should consider your feed costs, and feed is typically $40-ish a bag. You can definitely get it significantly less, but you get what you pay for when it comes to livestock feed. So just make sure you make that choice depending on what you want. Another thing to know about your area and your neighborhood where you live is the predators that surround there. So our biggest predators on the farm for chickens are actually hawks, owls, and coyotes. Used to be raccoons, but they've laid off quite a bit. But other things that can attack your chickens would be I'm forgetting the name of them right now, weasels, possums, raccoons, any kind of prey bird, and then even your household pets. So I have a 110 Anatolian Shepherd named Rufus. He is a bred farm dog, not specifically, but Anatolian is a farm breed, and they're supposed to be great as guardian dogs. Mine is not. He is the worst. He is the biggest predator of my chickens. He has single-handedly taken out most of my chickens. So even your pets can be predators, and that includes cats as well. Some cats are really good with them, some cats aren't. So just something to keep aware of. Then loss is something that you need to think about. Chickens are small birds, and if they're out in the open, you have a good chance of losing some of them. So that's something that you need to consider, is how you're going to handle that, where you're going to dispose of the bird, and things like that. Something really important with loss: if your bird dies suddenly or is attacked by something, please do not eat it. That seems like common sense, but it's not. So you don't want to have any sort of bird that died suddenly from some sort of disease and be eating that, or obviously if it has any puncture wounds from any sort of other animal, you don't want to be eating that. All right, we're going to dive into chicken coops. So chicken coop is a structure that can protect hens from all kinds of weather. We're going to get a little bit deeper into the type of chicken coop next. These are just some things to keep in mind. So typically you want one nesting box per 5 hens. So if you only have 5 hens, which is a common city ordinance, then you'll only need one nesting box. I always tend to put 2 in, just so that they can have the choice, But in most times, I notice that they pick a favorite and then they all fight over it. So even though there's plenty of room, they usually all flock to one coop. If you do have a hen who's sitting on her eggs, we call that a broody hen. If you don't have a rooster, she is not going to hatch those eggs, so you'll want to reach under and grab from her anyways. If you have a rooster and you want to hatch some chickens, there you go. But 1 nesting box per 5 hens. You'll want to have a latch somewhere on your coop that you can open and reach in and grab the eggs out. Some people don't have this option. If you have kind of a backyard shed that you've converted into a chicken coop, you can walk in and grab them. I personally don't like to walk into my chicken coops. They're really dirty. The chickens sit on a roost, so they're just pooping all over the floor all night long. It adds up, it piles up. It's pretty nasty in there, so I don't personally like to walk in there, but you can just walk in if your coop allows that. Otherwise, a hatch is really nice to just kind of reach in. It also keeps the eggs really clean, so something good to have. You do need airflow in your chicken coop, so you'll need either ventilation slats at the top or anywhere else that you can fit them, or just small holes drilled in that no animals can get in, but that air can circulate through. You'll also need a perch. So like I said before, chickens perch at night. They like to be up in, typically if you don't have a coop, in some places they don't have coops at all, especially in the warmer climates, and their birds will just perch in the trees. That's kind of their natural place to go. If we are late, and have new chickens and they're not used to their coop yet, we'll find them all around the property in trees. It's kind of their natural habitat of where they perch at night. Otherwise, a perch in a chicken coop can be a 2x4 going across, a pole. Some people build like a triangle teepee kind of thing with different steps for them to perch on, but they definitely like to perch. And then the typical rule for space is 4 square feet per bird. So something else that is good to keep in mind. Excuse me. All right, let's jump into the types of chicken coops. All right, so you will see here there are some drawing pictures up here. These are actually from my book. In order to avoid any sort of copywriting, my grandmother illustrated all of these. So it's kind of special. My grandma and I went in on this book together, but this is a typical chicken coop with an enclosed run. These are really great because the chickens are confined to one space. So if you're a backyard chicken owner, this is a good option because they're not all over your yard. If you have other animals or dogs, if you just want to keep your yard poop-free, even though the chicken poop is a great fertilizer for your lawn. But this is a great structure that does not move, that is enclosed. So the chickens have an area and access to an outdoor area where they can get fresh air, but they are enclosed in their coop. These are also nice because it's a little bit less maintenance. You don't have to go out necessarily every morning and open the coop and close the coop if they're in this closed structure. Typically, they can just get out and get back in, and you don't have to worry about doing that type of chore every morning. It also is a great way to protect the birds from any predators. They are already enclosed. You don't have to worry about the prey birds coming in or anything like that. And they're typically pretty easy to maintain. It's a smaller place to clean. You don't have to worry so much about cleaning and everything like that. All right, these are what I like to call box store coops. I think they probably have a better name for them, but that's what I call them. These are the typical chicken coops that you see at Farm and Fleet and in your farm stores. These are nice looking coops and they're meant to be built to look nice, but they are pretty flimsy. They do not last long. They do not offer any sort of protection. This coop literally just sits right on the grass, so raccoons can even lift that up. So it's not necessarily the best option. In fact, it's an option I do not recommend at all. It only can fit 2 to 3 birds as well. So very small. It's great if you only want a few chickens and that if you can put it inside of another fenced-in area. But this is not really a safe option for chickens. And they're also just built very cheaply. So you're not going to get much use out of this chicken coop. So I would definitely recommend building your own version of this if you want something this size. That's going to be a little more safer for the chickens. One way that makes it a bit safer is if you were to take the open space here and dig this into the ground. If you were making it yourself, taking this fencing here and actually burying it a little bit, that'll keep some of the predators out a little bit better. All right, our next kind of coop is an A-frame coop. These are kind of an alternative to free-range chickens. The reason why is because they're small and narrow. They often have wheels on one side so that you can pull it and move it around your yard. This one is really nice for meat birds. This is a typical kind of setup for meat birds. There's different kinds of chicken tunnels is what we call them, but this is a pretty standard one where you can just kind of keep them in there all the time. You don't need to provide as much shelter, and as long as it's covered and they can get out of the weather, they're pretty good. It's easy to move around, like I mentioned, so this is a great option, especially for meat birds. Oh, it looks like I put that in twice. All right, so these are large coops. I apologize, these are a little bit blurry, but this is actually my chicken coop that we use right now. These two photos here, I did not realize they were so blurry. I apologize for that. A lot of these coops have wheels on them that are big. Like this one here has a wheel, and those you can move around too, but these are more permanent structures. You can fit 4 to 6 nesting boxes in coops this size, so you can have multiple chickens. You'll see here on mine at home, I have this nice big latch in the back. And this big latch folds down, and my nesting boxes are right there. So it's super easy to collect the eggs. I do have to open and close this coop every single night. The door is here. So this door does need to be open and closed every single night so that the chickens are safe. This is a great option for free-range or pasture-raised chickens. This lets them roam around their yard. You have to open it, and then they have free range of your property. So if that's the option that you're going with, this is a great option for the coop. However, you can go back to that first coop we talked about and just open the door as well if you prefer that. So this one, you will need some sort of protection for your chickens. A rooster, a large guardian dog. Electric fencing is really common with these kinds of coops. They now have this electric netting fencing that you can move around, which is really nice. So something like that. Some sort of predator protection you're gonna want with a coop like this, because there's nowhere to keep the birds inside, and you can't leave them inside the coop, especially in hot weather days like when it's 90 degrees out in the middle of summer. They will suffocate, and it'll be a bad scene. But this is probably my favorite type of coop. It's the one that I've used the most. All right, we're gonna move on to getting your chickens. So, I don't know what is happening, but it's supposed to say getting chicks. So getting the chicks is an awesome part of the experience. It's probably the most exciting part of the experience. And getting the chicks, when you start, you're gonna wanna pick the breeds. There's a ton of different breeds, and they all lay different colored eggs. So that's a really fun part. Most of the magazines you get, or if you're looking online, they will show you the egg color, they'll tell you the egg color, they'll tell you what the bird is good for. So birds are classified usually as egg layers, hybrids, or meat birds. So the egg layers are, as it's named, they are used for laying eggs. Hybrids are good for both meat and laying eggs, and then meat birds are typically best for just meat. So you'll see here there's a bunch of different colors, and chickens can be really beautiful. The most common ones that we have are Buff Orpingtons. They're really great layers. They typically lay a brown egg along with New Hampshire Reds or Rhode Island Reds, and those also lay brown. The silver-laced Wyandottes we have quite a few of as well. They lay a really deep brown spotted egg that is really pretty. And let's see, Americanas are really nice birds. They tend to lay all sorts of different colored eggs. And I don't have any Easter eggers up here, which Easter eggers also lay different eggs. In my next slide here, I have a picture of all the different eggs here and who lays them and what color they are. So this is great reference for when you're picking out your chicks. If you want a really beautiful array of different colored eggs, definitely keep an eye on that when you're trying to pick out your chicks. So you can order chicks from farm stores locally. You can get them at Trellis, which is in St. Charles on Kirk Road. They are my favorite place to get my chicks from. It's where I get them every year. You can also get them from Farm and Fleet or Tractor Supply. And then Murray McMurray Hatchery is probably the most popular online option, along with Meyer Hatchery. Those are two big ones. They're very popular. If you order your chicks, it's kind of a fun process. They come in a box as pictured, and they come live, and the post office will call you and say your chicks are here, and you have like 24 hours to get there. The sooner the better. When your chicks arrive in a box like this, they are only a day old. So you have to get there and you have to be ready for that pickup date. So when you order them, you need to be ready. When they say they're going to be here March 7th, you need to clear March 7th, because the longer they sit in that box, the higher mortality rate you have. You have to get them out and into a brooder as quickly as you can. Another thing when ordering from a hatchery is they're going to ask or tell you that the birds are sexed or unsexed. So sexed simply means that they are distinguished between male and female. Unsexed means the birds you're going to get are going to be random, and you could get roosters or hens. So they're pretty good actually at this. They're pretty accurate. However, you sometimes will get a rooster in the mix. And that is something that you also need to consider when you're thinking about getting chickens, because a lot of these places, majority, I would say, if not all, unless you're in a rural area, you cannot have a rooster. So you do need to have a plan of what you're going to do with that rooster, because the second it starts crowing, that's when your neighbors are going to get angry. So this is a difficult topic, because personally, I get, probably anywhere from 20 to 50 messages a season asking if I'll take a rooster. It is one of my pet peeves because it's been happening for 6 years, but I do not take roosters. A lot of farms will not take roosters. A lot of people will not take roosters. So it's something that you need to consider, another sort of plan for getting rid of a rooster. You also need to be careful with selling roosters online or getting rid of them on Craigslist, which sometimes it's your only way, but there are a lot of underground rooster fighting rings in the area. I know that's strange, but it's very common. They just busted someone a couple years ago, probably 7 miles from my house, that had a huge rooster fighting operation. So that is still a thing, and just something to be aware of as you're moving into it. All right, so once you get the chicks, you're going to need a brooder. A brooder is a box or a tub or a giant, container that you keep your chicks in as they grow up. So once you get your chicks, like I said, they're usually a day or two old. They cannot be out into the wild for 9 to 12 weeks. So they do need to stay inside. Something else that is good to consider and to figure out where you're going to keep them. So we keep ours in our garage. This is the best option for us. A lot of people start their chicks inside, and that is fine as well. Just keep in mind, the older they get, the smellier they get in a confined space. When they're out in their coop, it's not so bad, but you'll definitely notice a smell. So some things to keep in mind is spacing. Your chicks are very tiny when you get them. They're adorable. They grow incredibly fast. So by the time 6 weeks hits, those chicks are going to be teenagers. They're going to be flying out the top. They're going to be running around your garage. I know from experience. So something to keep in mind. This down here is like a big water trough. This is what we use to start all of our chicks in. So we always start our chicks in a water trough. By the end, we do have to move them to something like this because there's simply not enough space. So you do want to make sure that you're accounting for space, and you can tell when they're too crowded. So just something to look out for. Lighting is super important. You need a heat lamp when you have chicks. We'll talk a little more in detail about the heat lamp in the next slide, but a heat lamp is necessary for having chicks. You'll obviously need food and water. This is a very messy spot here, the food and water. I've gotten creative over the years. If you have a structure like this, that's really easy to build. You have this bar up top that you can hang your waterer from. You just have to make sure that the chicks can get in it. Or you can just set it on the ground like this, which is what I typically do, but expect to clean this out multiple times a day because chicks love to dig and kick around, and they're going to kick all of that mulch and bedding into their water, and they're not going to be able to get water. So just expect to clean that out quite often, definitely multiple times a day. Or you can raise it up off the ground a little bit where they're able to get in. I've even put little pieces of 2x4s underneath to just raise it up a little bit, and it keeps some of that dust out of there. The flooring or bedding is also something that you're going to want to figure out. So I'm having a blank moment right now. This pine, I want to call it pine dust, but I know that's not what it is. But this bedding, what is it? It's just lost, it's left my brain. But anyway, any sort of bedding that you can use would be good. Some people use some torn up newspaper. They use this pine bedding. I would not recommend mulch or anything like that. Something definitely soft, fluffy, easy to clean, because you're also going to be changing this out quite often in the beginning. Draft protection is huge when it comes to raising chickens. You want to make sure that they are not in any sort of drafty area. So if your garage is super drafty, you want to make sure that you move them somewhere else. They do not do well with drafts, and you'll usually be getting your chicks still in the cooler months, so March, April, when it can still get pretty chilly out. So you want to make sure that they're in a nice warm spot where not a lot of draft is happening. Location we kind of talked over, just be careful where you put them based on the smell and as they get older. You do need to have predator protection again with these. So inside is the best spot, away from your animals. If you put them outside, make sure your coop is heated and secure. You will need a little thermometer. This is necessary, I would say, when you're starting out brand new. I don't typically use the thermometer anymore. You'll see a chart on the next page that will show you what to look out for. So I'm pretty good at figuring out the temperature at this point, but a little thermometer helps a lot. You can buy them when you get your chicks. They're like 90 cents. They're tiny, you just throw it in there and you can see the temperature that the light is putting off. One thing I would recommend, as the chicks get older, they will fly out if your walls are not high enough. So some sort of covering for the coop. I've used old screens, and I've also bought roll of screen and just put it over and stapled it on. Something where air can definitely still get through, but can confine the chicks, because they do start flying pretty quick. All right. So this is the, I don't know why words are missing here, because they're here, but not here. So heat lamp is very crucial to having the chicks. The chicks need to have a certain temperature. I believe it's like 97.9-ish in that area is where it needs to stay. As the chicks get older every day, that temp decreases just slightly. So more details are on my book on that and also all over the internet. But for the heat lamp, this is a really great chart to take a look at. So the red dot in the middle of this chart is the heat lamp. And obviously the little yellow dots are the chicks. So if they're too cold, you're gonna see all of your chicks huddled under the lamp like that. That means that the lamp is too high and you need to lower it just slightly. If it's too hot in the coop or in your brooder, all of the chicks are gonna be on the edge of whatever brooder you're in. So if none of them are by the light, it's too hot in there. If it's drafty, if it's drafty, you'll see all the chicks to one side and they'll be clustered kind of in one area. That means that it is too drafty in there, so you have a draft issue that you need to fix. And then if the chicks are pretty equally scattered throughout your brooder, then you have a good temperature going. Oh my gosh, I am just a mess, you guys. I apologize. So that is a good temperature. Your chicks are happy, and the temperature is correct. So that's why I have stopped using a thermometer, because I've memorized this chart and I can kind of tell just by quickly looking into the brooder to see how the temperature is doing. All right, let's talk about feed. So for feeding chickens, from 0 to 8 weeks, you have starter feed. This feed is very ground up, like up here, and easy for the chicks to eat. From 8 weeks to 18 weeks, you move them to grower feed. And the difference between these feeds is heavily the protein level. So it's kind of getting your chicks ready for laying. And then week 18 and on, you have layer feed. And once you move them onto layer feed, they're getting ready to start laying. However, they don't lay until 20 to 24 weeks or so. So again, with the food, 0 to 8 weeks is only the starter feed. So you don't want to feed them anything else but the starter feed from 0 to 8 weeks. From 8 weeks to 18 weeks, you can start slowly introducing scraps from your kitchen. So I would do things like little bits of carrot, little bits of melon, whatever you kind of have laying around, little bits of lettuce, tear it up small still, because they're still pretty small at this age. 18 plus weeks, you can feed them all sorts of feed scraps and calcium. I highly recommend supplementing them with calcium. It is going to build up the layer of their shell to make their shell nice and strong when they start laying. The most common form of calcium for chickens is oyster shells. So you can buy these oyster shells at your local feed store. You can get them online. And they're just ground up oyster shells. You mix it in with their food, they get little bits of it, and it just helps boost their calcium levels. There is certain foods that you cannot feed chickens, so it's good to look out for that. Things like onions, garlic, asparagus. Think anything that's going to affect the taste of an egg. So if you don't want your eggs tasting like asparagus or garlic, don't feed it to them. Also, with that, is birds are a bit carnivoric. So they will eat meat scraps. I don't feed my birds that, but meat scraps, they will eat their own eggs. They will eat their own egg shells. So a lot of times this can cause confusion to the birds. So if you are going to feed them their egg shells back, which is a great source of calcium, what I would do first is wash out all the eggs so that they don't get any taste of what's inside the egg. Put them on a baking sheet and put them in the oven at 200 for about 45 minutes, and then blend them all up in a coffee grounder or by hand so that they can't really distinguish that it's a shell, because once the birds figure out what their own eggs taste like, they will start eating their eggs. So you don't want that, obviously, because you want to harvest the eggs. So you want them to eat yourself. So to avoid that, just make sure that if you're going to use the eggshells, which I've done plenty of times in the past, make sure they can't really figure that out. They're smart. All right, so then it's time to move outside. And again, the slide is a mess. When fully feathered, you can move them outside. This is typically at 9 to 12 weeks. So we like to call 3 to 6 weeks their teenage phase. And I mean, look at the difference from 1 week to 3 weeks. It's pretty insane how fast they grow. I mean, in 30 weeks, they're full grown and laying. So it's kind of insane, but 3 to 6 weeks is when they're teenagers. 6 weeks is when they start getting rebellious. That is when they start jumping out of their brood. They start getting antsy. They want to go outside, but it's still too early for them. 12 weeks is when you can start to see their true feathers. So if you've ever seen a baby chick in person, you know that they're super soft and cuddly. Those are their baby feathers. By 3 weeks, you still have a lot of fluff, but you're starting to see their feathers come in. 6 weeks, their feathers are still coming in, but you can still see some of that fuzz. By 12 weeks, all the fuzz is gone, except sometimes a little bit on the tail, but for the majority over all of their body, the true feathers are in. And then they just keep growing and getting thicker as you go on. So when you're going to move outside, you do want to introduce them to the outside world slowly. If you already have chickens, that's kind of a whole nother area, but I kind of do the same technique when I'm introducing. So I have an old dog kennel, And I will take all the chickens and put them in this old dog kennel without the base so that they're on grass, and put them out there for a couple hours. You do want to start by just doing a few hours at a time to get them used to the drafts, to the weather, to being on grass, to looking outside to their surroundings. Keep in mind they haven't seen the outside world yet. So a little bit at a time. You can increase that time each day, and I usually do it for about 3 or 4 days, and I kind of do a faster paced one. There's people who say you should do just an hour a day and increase it by an hour. I typically start at 3 to 4 hours, sometimes longer if I'm busy, put them back in, and then I'll do half a day or 6 to 8 hours the next day, and then I'll do from sunrise to sunset the last day, and then I move them in the coop. Something you want to do when you bring your birds out and you're finally done introducing them is showing them where the water is. So this is kind of a cool trick, but all you do is take one bird and dip their beak into whatever waterer you're using. So there's a bunch of different options for watering, but if you just have a basic chicken waterer, you dip their beak in, they know where the water is. That chicken will then show the rest of the chickens where the water is. I have done this step most of the time. I have also accidentally skipped this step, and they've always found the water. So as long as it's around, they'll typically find it. Coop training is the bane of my existence. This is, in my opinion, the worst part about having chickens. However, they're smart, so it's typically a 3 to 5 day process. But obviously, when you bring the chickens out, they don't know where they're supposed to go at night. So coop training is something that you're going to have to get used to. You're going to have to chase them around and catch them and put them in their coop to train them. So what I like to do also is when I bring them out, I bring out my birds at night. When I'm transitioning them after we've done the introduction and I'm transitioning them to the coop, I bring them out in the evening and I put them in the coop for the entire night. This kind of helps them take that time overnight to get used to their surroundings, figure out where they are and what they're in, and I let them out in the morning. The following night is the night where they just don't get it. They don't know where to go, so you do have to herd them into the chicken coop at night to close them up. This is where that nice enclosed coop with an indoor-outdoor option is nice. You don't have to do that, but if you do have a freestanding one, you do need to train them on their chicken coop. This does take 3 to 5 days of catching the birds. Some birds take longer than others. Some get it on the first day, some don't get it till the 5th day. So you do just kind of have to herd them in, chase them, catch them, put them in. It can be a process if you have a lot of land and an open coop. But another way you can avoid that if you're doing the open coop situation is set up a little temporary fence outside until they get used to their coop and then open that up. That's what we've started doing in the last recent years, is putting up a temporary fence with enough room for them to roam, but so that they are close enough to the coop that they know where to go at night. Once they are all in the coop and all together, they will start establishing a pecking order. This can freak people out because there will be a lot of fighting, a lot of chicken fights. They basically fly at each other, they peck at each other, they kick each other, they get into it. This is a very, very natural thing. There has to be a mother hen. The mother hen is the one who pretty much calls the shots for the entire coop. She is the boss, and everyone falls in reign under her. And they have a very specific reign, so when one dies, the next one takes over. They've got it all figured out, but this does take a while for them to figure out their pecking order, to see who will be the boss and who will not. And once they've got that figured out, the fighting stops, and they all live in harmony. So it's very normal if you put your chickens out and you just are freaking out because they're fighting. It's a very normal process. They're just figuring out their pecking order. Another thing to consider if you live in this area or any area with winter is your winter prep. So you're going to want to figure out how you're going to keep your water from freezing in the winter, how you're going to help your chickens get in and out of the coop if we get a significant amount of snow. I have had to go out there before and shovel pathways in our coop area so that they can walk around and get outside. And then also just making sure that your coop is winterized as well. So what we do for winterization is we just do, it's called a deep bed method. So instead of having all of the, I still cannot think of this. Do you guys know the word I'm trying to think of? Pine needles, but it's like sawdust. It's not. I know. I cannot for the life of me remember. Shavings, pine shavings. There we go. Thank you. It's like, this is going to drive me nuts. But the pine shavings in your coop in the summer can be light. Cover the ground, easy for you to shovel out. You do have to clean your coop occasionally, which we can get into. But for the winter prep, I do the deep bed method, which is basically packing those wood shavings pretty high. I would say at least a foot of wood shavings. The reason why is that poop from the chickens when they're roosting is going to drip down a little bit into there, and it's actually going to form its own self-insulation. So in the winter, it's going to stay much warmer in there if you have a deep bed of pine shavings. So that's what we do. It's been great. We have never lost a chicken due to cold, which is amazing because it gets really cold here, and they've always been pretty happy. The worst part about it is cleaning it out in the spring, and because it's, a foot of poop sawdust, and it is heavy and a lot of work. So cleaning out is the worst part, but we typically only clean our coop. It depends. If we have some sort of breakout of mites or anything like that, we are obviously cleaning it much more often. But typically, I would say we clean it about 3 times a year. We'll clean it in the spring. We'll clean it midsummer if it's necessary, and then we'll clean it in the fall and in the winter when we're going into the winter season to prepare it for winter. So I only clean mine 2 to 3 times a year typically, unless there is some need to be cleaning out the bedding, disease, pests, what have you. Otherwise, the coop cleaning isn't all that necessary. When we do clean the coop, the only thing I do is change out the bedding. I do not mess with, some people go in and bleach it and things like that. I do not mess with that personally. I don't find it necessary. Our coops stay pretty clean in general because our birds are outside. So that might be something that you will need to consider if you have an enclosed coop. It probably gets much more dirty. So you might need to do a little bit more maintenance than typical if you have a closed coop. All right, so then, seems like a long time, because it kind of is, but sometime between 20 and 25 weeks, you'll walk out into your coop and find your first egg. It is like Christmas, and after that, they come flowing. So once one chicken starts to lay the egg, you're going to know that all of your chickens are about to start laying. Some take a little, give or take a week to get into it, but you will soon have fresh eggs. Eggs do not need to be refrigerated when you harvest them. They can stay on your counter for quite a few months, honestly. When eggs are laid, they do have this protective film around the outside. It does stop the egg from spoiling. So the only time that you need to refrigerate your eggs is if you wash them and you wash that film off, then they need to be in the fridge. Otherwise, you can just harvest them and leave them on your counter and use them as you need to. But that is a preference, a personal preference. My eggs can get pretty dirty sometimes, so I'll wash most of them. But if they come out pristine and clean like this, there's no way I'm washing them. So just a good thing to know. I do typically wash them before I use them, no matter what the situation is. But if your eggs are coming out really clean, you do not need to take up the space in your fridge if you don't want to. But very much so a personal preference. Some people prefer to just put them in the fridge right away. All right, and that is the basics of understanding chickens. So thank you so much. Are there any questions?
I'm not seeing any coming through on the Zoom, but I know, Jillae, you have been super open about people shooting you an email if they have questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So if anybody thinks of anything, you know how to get a hold of her. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this amazing series. Thank you so much, Jillae.
Yeah.
And happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you. Happy holidays.